You're listening to the Spark Your Light podcast, episode number 272, How to Spark Motivation. This episode is for you if you're often seeking out motivation, you wonder where it comes from. Sometimes you feel like maybe you're not that motivated. Are some people born motivated? Or you're just hungry for all the motivation all the time. If that's you, keep listening. So motivation is a really interesting topic for me as someone who technically is a motivational speaker. That's the common term for my career. That's the term that an average person who's not familiar with the speaking industry would use to describe what I do, or anyone who speaks on stages. And that word has always been really interesting to me. In fact, bothersome, because I feel that when I come on stage, my mission is to not motivate. My mission is to change the perspective of someone in the audience so they can see a concept differently. And most prevalently, I speak about resiliency and optimism. And so if they can change the way that they see themselves, their willingness to stay committed to their goals and change their mindset around that, that changes their entire life forever. That is not motivation for one day. But if they can really change the way they see things through what I'm sharing, everything will change. And that's actually the feedback I get on this podcast a lot. I read your reviews, by the way. So if you've left a review, I'm very, very grateful. And if you have never left a review, but you love this show, I'd be grateful for all the reviews because I read them and I read about what has helped you guys the most so that I can create content that continues to help and support. And one of the things that I've seen in so many of the reviews is perspective, that this podcast gives you perspective. It gives you a different perspective on something. You never thought of it that way. It helps you see things differently. And I love that. I want to be that. I don't want to be your motivation. If I happen to also motivate you, that's great. You can listen to me every day. Let me motivate you. But I want to do more than just motivate you. And that's my beef with the word motivation as someone who is a speaker. That being said, I do believe we need motivation. I believe motivation is essential. And I don't believe that some people are born with it and other people aren't. I think that's a myth. I think that's something that people who struggle with motivation like to use as an excuse. They use it as an excuse to believe that it's not their fault. They just don't have a lot of motivation. They're just not like those other people. I'm just not like you, Jacqueline. I'm just not motivated. It's not a character trait. It's not something that some people are born with and other people are born without. It's something that we choose to tap into on a daily basis. And so I like to think of motivation like food. If you do not eat 3 meals, and if you're anything like me, 2 snacks a day, you will be hungry. If you do not feed your brain motivation every single day, you will be lazy. Period. So you need to figure out how to spark your motivation and feed yourself that motivation on a daily basis. So I am on a lifelong quest for staying motivated, especially now as a mom, as someone who has limited time to work and pursue my personal goals because I'm caring for my baby. And that means that when I put my son down for a nap and I know that we've got max 2 hours, I need to be motivated enough to get right to whatever it is that's important to me that day. Maybe it's writing some newsletters. Maybe it's working on a speech. Maybe it's cooking dinner for the night, putting laundry away, cleaning the kitchen, whatever it is that's important on my list, on the things that I want to do. Maybe it's relaxing. Sometimes that's important because I need a break. And I'm in touch with myself and my own energy levels. And maybe I just need to sit and read my book or take a shower because mama hasn't had her hair washed in 3 days, right? Who knows? Whatever it is, I need to be motivated to do that thing and not just open my phone answer 3 texts, notice I have an Instagram notification, look at the notification, and then wonder how 30 minutes has gone by accident. Who's done that? I hate when I do that because that means I'm being unintentional with my time. And that drives me crazy. It's not about working 24/7. It might be, okay, Jacqueline just wants to shower or just wants to read her book and relax. It's about being intentional with your time because every minute matters. And that's something that motherhood has taught me more than anything else. I wish I was as intentional as I am now 2 years ago. So if you don't have children yet, take this as a message to be intentional with every minute of your time. Stop wasting it. And that even means, I always say this to Richie, if he's listening, he's going to know that this is something I always say to him. It's okay if you want to scroll on your phone, but be intentional about it. Decide, I'm mentally fried and I want to scroll on my phone for 10 minutes. Don't just somehow open an app and then you didn't think about it. You're scrolling for 30 minutes and you missed the time that you wanted to spend working out or doing something else. Don't do that. Be intentional. Being intentional requires motivation. So, how do we spark that motivation? My number one strategy is consuming content that sparks your light for the goal you're working on. So I'm going to give you lots of different examples. So for me, if I am working on the goal of writing my book proposal and eventually the long-term goal, as you guys know, is writing my 3rd book, getting a traditional publishing deal, and having it sold in Target. That is my goal. So I am going to listen to content that sparks my light on that subject. And there are various different categories within this. So one category might be hearing success stories of people who've done it before. So this can apply to any goal you're working towards. You want to listen to people who've been where you are and who've gotten out of it and achieved where you want to go. That is so motivating. Listen to those on repeat. Find as many as you can. So what I like to do is I like to actually use Apple Podcasts, but if you're a Spotify user, you can probably do this on Spotify. You can search for topics essentially. So I'll search like landing my book proposal and I'll find all of these random episodes of podcasts I've never even listened to before that are these people sharing their story of how they got a book proposal for their first book. And I love hearing the story. It's so inspiring and it gives me ideas for, oh, they did this way. That's interesting. I never thought of that. You can also find a book that is, one person's journey. So let's say you love entrepreneurship and you're pursuing a business goal. Maybe you find a book of an entrepreneur that really inspires you and you read, or better yet, listen to the audiobook, because there's something about listening throughout the day. So with reading, you have to set aside time to do it, which I'm all about reading physical books too. I love physical books. But with listening, most of us have downtime in our day. Whether it's driving time, maybe you're in the shower, maybe you're folding laundry, maybe you're on your lunch break. There's usually time where you can listen to something as background music. And so we can listen a lot more than we can read. And so I love the audiobooks for this context of sparking motivation, or podcasts. You may find a specific podcast that is all examples, going with the business example, maybe like a podcast like How I Built This. I love that show. If you're an entrepreneur and you don't listen to it, add it to your list. It is amazing stories of successful entrepreneurs. A lot of them are household brands or names you know, and they were all just like you. They all just started not knowing anything, failing a bunch. It is so great to hear that. It is so motivating. So finding content that shares that success story, that is one extremely motivating factor. Another thing you can do with regards to content that sparks your light on that topic is content that teaches. So I love listening to how-to guides on writing your book proposal and how-to on writing a book. And, content that teaches me steps, that gives me education related to this goal I'm pursuing. The same is true about speaking. So I really enjoy listening to content about speaking and how to speak better. I just listened to Dale Carnegie's book, The Art of Public Speaking, and it was really fascinating for me. And it definitely sparked my light around giving my new keynote and how I can deliver it in a way that resonates and lands with the audience. And so those are my goals. Think about what your goals are and think about what kind of educational content would really excite you and help you learn and give you ideas of things you might want to implement. So any content that relates to the goal itself, whether it's a success story, educational content, any kind of category that relates, listen to it all day, as frequently as you can. And this is why focusing on one thing at a time is something I'm a huge advocate for. I love the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's a book about focusing on one thing and how that can really help exponentially move forward your growth. And I love to focus on one goal at a time. So right now, I'm all about my keynote. I am thinking about that. I am listening to content on that. I am all on that until my target finish date. And then I will move on to the next goal and I will focus more on my book proposal. I want to mention that not everyone is like me. So if you're listening and you're like, I can't function that way. My husband, Richie, is not like this. I have tried to get him to change because I truly believe that this was the way. And this is a really great message about personal growth content and advice for productivity and all these things. You may hear someone's advice and it really works for them. And it may not work for you and it may not be your way. And that's okay because there's not one way and there's not one type of person. And that is really important to remember. And for so long, I thought that my way of focusing on one thing was the right way and that Richie would be more successful if he could just focus more. I actually made him listen to the One Thing audiobook because I was like, maybe I can't get through to him, but this book will. And one day he told me about a podcast he listened to about some successful entrepreneur who had 5 businesses and did this and did that. And it was so inspiring to him because the way that this guy spoke and described, how he thinks, and it's exactly how Richie thinks. And it makes so much sense to him and it makes him feel seen and heard. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I have been misguiding you because I have been thinking that the way that works for me is the way that works for you. And it's not, and it doesn't. So one thing might not be your thing. You might be more like Richie and you might be multi-passionate. You might get bored thinking about one thing at a time. So you might have a couple things going at once. But you can apply this strategy still by focusing on stories and content around that subject and that goal when you're working on it. So Richie might listen to content about house projects when he's working on house projects. And in fact, he does this. There's this show, This Old House. 75% of my audience is women. So the women in this audience, that's such a stereotype, actually. Maybe some of you watch This Old House. I don't know. More likely than not, though, less of you do. And sometimes I go outside and I find Richie in the garage and he's like working on some project and he's watching This Old House. So it's a perfect example of how you can listen to content about the thing you're working on, about the thing you're trying to be motivated on. So he's watching these shows where they're like fixing up these old houses and he's fixing up something in our house. It's great. Very, very motivating for him and very inspiring. So you can apply this with each of the individual goals as well. It does not have to be only one thing, only one goal. But the concept here is to focus on content that sparks your light relating to that goal so that you can stay motivated throughout your day and stay connected to it. I also like to write down my goals on a daily basis so I stay more connected to them. I always write them as if they've already happened as a manifestation practice. So try these things out. Let me know how they go. I would love to hear. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you have a week that sparks your light, and I will catch you in the next episode.